Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. As the title suggests, we're going to look at the 10 things you need to know about preparing your race car before you hit the track. Alright, so today we're going to dig pretty deep into the 10 things you probably need to know to prepare your race car before you go racing. Before we start, we've got plenty of content like this on the way, so if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, click the button down below, click the bell to receive all notifications, and you'll see more videos like this upcoming on this channel. With that out of the way, let's get started. Alright, so let's just get straight into this. First cab off the rank, we have a bolt check. And what do I mean by that? Well, essentially exactly what it says. It is going around the car and checking every single critical bolt on this car. So something like this, where there's a trans brake and there's a lot of load and there's a lot of vibration through the chassis as well, can mean that bolts, if they're not torqued up correctly, could actually come loose pretty easily. So we're going to check wheel studs, you're going to check suspension arms, you're going to check shock absorber mounts, you're going to check a whole range of things, gearbox cross members, engine cross members, basically anything that is a critical mounting component that bolts something up to the chassis, you got to check it. So it's not just all of these bolts that bolt to the chassis, but some of the stuff connected to the engine too, exhaust manifolds, intake manifolds, turbos, all this kind of stuff. You should be checking that to make sure they're ultra tight, because they could lead to a loss of performance, and you know, if you're hitting their drag strip, you want every little bit of performance you can get. So second up's hose and fittings. Sounds like a pretty simple one, but you need to remember, when your car's not running, you might not see lines actively leaking. So like your fuel system, oil system, transmission lines, brake lines, when you're not using these components, they won't actually leak because they're not under pressure. So if you can, pressurize your fuel system and see if there's any leaks there. If your car's not like a race car, at least where it's a bit loud to run at home, run it up, pressurize all those lines, see if there are any leaks, and just go over and do a quick spanner check of things too. Also the vacuum lines, just check to make sure there's no holes and there's no kinks in them, and yeah, then you'll be right to go. Right, so number 3 is a critical one, obviously, your brakes and tyres. So your braking system is what will stop you in the deep end when you're going at, however many mile an hour you go. Hopefully you're going really, really fast. So if your brake system's not up to check, well, you know, it doesn't matter how fast you go, eventually you've got to stop, and you want to come to a nice gradual stop. You don't want a nice sudden stop straight into a wall or in a sand trap in the deep end of the track. So braking system's critical. Your tyres are also critical, so you've got to check that if you haven't raced in quite a while, that there's no cracking on the outside of your tyres, that the tyres aren't old, that your wheels aren't, you know, haven't got a chip in them, or if there's a slow leak in a tyre, that you investigate that. So just make sure the tyre condition's right, that there's no, it's not grabbing on any bodywork the last time you raced or anything like that, and just make sure, tyres are all pumped up, ready to go, and you can adjust pressures at the track. That's easy, but you've got to have enough air in it first if you want to adjust down. So it's going to make it ultra hard to get air back into them. Sometimes some tracks don't have easily accessible air, so you might have to bring some yourself, but put way too much pressure. So just say in your rears you might run 10 psi when you're racing, we'll just put 25 psi in them, put it on the trailer, off the trailer, and then when you get to the track, adjust the pressures. Right, so a critical one that's probably overlooked by a fair few people, because it is just an easy one to miss, would be wheel bearings. So your wheel bearings obviously are what retains this hub onto your axle or onto your stub axle. So if they fail, you're going to have a really, really bad day. And if that happens at speed, you're going to, you hopefully walk away from it, but who knows, you might not. So those wheel bearing checks are ultra important, very easy to do. It's just a case of putting, as you can see here, putting a wheel on, grab the wheel and tyre at like sort of a 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock position, and wobble back and forward. And again at 6 and 12, wobble back and forward, and what you're feeling for there is essentially no movement in the wheel and tyre. You want it to be nice and firm. If there is movement there, well, you're going to have to investigate that wheel bearing further. However, they are ultra cheap, so if you do feel any movement in that wheel bearing, then I'd recommend just replacing it straight up. Right, so a fluids change and check. Now, while you're not going to probably change your brake fluid or your differential fluid every single pass, or even your transmission fluid for that matter, your engine oil, you might be changing that out every single meet, depending on the kind of fuels you're running. Alcohol-based fuels tend to pickle the oil up, and you might have to change those more regularly. But again, your coolant, your engine oil, your transmission fluid, your differential fluid, your brake fluid, all these things, just check them over, make sure they're at the right levels they're meant to be, and make sure they're the right kind of colours. Nothing worse than getting a racetrack and your transmission doesn't work properly, and then you dump the fluid later and you find out that it was actually burnt from the last time you raced. So check all those things, and you'll have a hustle-free a day, hopefully. Next one is an electronics check. Now, this simply means if you've got an aftermarket ECU or you've done a lot of work on your car in terms of electronics, where this is all aftermarket. There's not another factory wire left in this vehicle. It's all aftermarket. So what I'll do is I'll turn the ECU on and I'll just check components and make sure they're working. So I'll check the trans brake, the bump function, scramble boost, all these kind of things, just to make sure they're actually working correctly. Even the line locker we just installed in, that'll be another further check that I'll do. Just want to make sure all these things are working, so when we get to the racetrack, we don't find out that something's not working that'll really hamper our day. You know, if we got to the track and found out trans brake wasn't working on this, that's as good as not bother racing, because we need that to actually run any kind of time. So electronics malfunctioning can be a real bugbear and a real hard thing to chase, so you're better off doing it right here in the garage than at the racetrack, that's for sure. Next up is your safety gear. So you've got to make sure your race suit is all up to date. If you've got gloves, socks, suit, whatever, helmet, make sure it's all up to code for the racetrack you're racing at. Make sure that if there's any certification on the chassis, that is also up to date, that all the logbooks also with the car when you go to race it. Fire extinguisher, is it in date? Is it in spec? Check that as well. So other things like, just visually checking your boots, your socks, your gloves, making sure they're all together, and visually checking things like your transmission blanket if you got one, your parachute, the lever and everything's working properly, and then hopefully you'll be covered and you'll be right in the event of a very hopefully unlikely accident. Alright, so we're almost finished here, last couple to go with, and next one is your tow vehicle. So if you've got a race car like I do, I can't drive this thing to the racetrack, I need to tow it there. So in order to tow it there, I need a tow vehicle and a trailer. And while I might be hiring the trailer from somewhere else, I've got to make sure that trailer's up to spec before I go anywhere. So I'll check the wheel bearings and the tyres and the condition, all that on that trailer as well. But also my own car, the tow car, I've got to make sure that the fluids are all right, the wheel bearings are also okay on that, and the way I load the car on the day is right to go too. So you want to make sure, your brakes, tyres, wheel bearings, fluids are all right in that tow car, because there's nothing worse than load it up, read it on the racetrack and a wheel falls off your trailer or something. It's actually very common. Just check those before you get underway. Alright, so last but not least is a crew check. Yeah, believe it or not, racing is great, but if you don't do it with your mates or you haven't got an extra pair of hands to help you on the day, then it might not be as an enjoyable experience as it is to share your experience with all your mates and that. So before you're going racing, just give them a heads up and say, hey, I know it's a couple of weeks out, but we're planning to go racing the next couple of weeks, so if you're available, love to see you there. So shout out to your mates and see if they can get to the racetrack and give you a hand. And if you have a great result, you'll be able to share it with them. So that'll be a good one. Now, in the very near future, we're going to run with what is essentially part 2 of this episode. So you're going to take your race car to the track, but what should you put in your tow car? So make sure to get this thing running for the day. Jacks, jack stands, extra fluids, all those kind of things. Well, stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, click that bell to receive all notifications, and you'll be notified when we upload that video. Okay, and with that, I say thanks for joining me. I hope you're now race prepared and race ready like I am. And in the near future, I hope to see you at a racetrack. Until then, I'll see you later.